Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about 5 tips for improving your propagation. Okay, number 1, when you take your cutting, you want to seal off the end that you cut. Make sure to use a clean pair of scissors or a razor blade, and when you cut in a slight angle, and then you're going to dip it in hydrogen peroxide. Here's a bit of 3% hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to dip just the end of it and not the root. So just the end of the stem. Many people use the leave it out in the air for, 10 hours approach. I found that this method kind of works the same, but it expedites that process when I don't have 10 hours or so to wait. So I take the cutting, dip it in a little hydrogen peroxide, and it's good to go. I've also seen people use wax to cover the end cap or cakey paste or a bunch of different other methods, but I have not had success with that. I've actually found it rots the stem quicker. So if you're gonna do it, do the air method to just leave it out for 10 to 12 hours or dip it in a little 3% hydrogen peroxide. It will dry up much quicker and you'll be good to go. And another tip on that, when you're taking your cutting, make sure to give yourself a little bit of space beyond the node to allow this to rot back. So we're sealing the end with hydrogen peroxide or the air so that ideally that rot stops and it doesn't blacken off. But if it does, I couldn't give myself that much here. Ideally, I would have given myself about an inch. And then each time it blackens back when I'm checking or starts browning off, I'll chop it back off and I'll want to have enough space to do that up until the node. So that's another little bonus tip. Okay, number 2, do not overlight your cutting. So this is my favorite light to use when taking cuttings. It's an 18 watt actual usage. I believe it's Barina LED. And the best thing to do is keep your cuttings about 6 inches away from something like this. It's very low power and very low light. The worst thing you could do for a cutting is to put it under something like a couple 100-watt grow light with the rest of your growing plants. What the plant will try and do is then grow without having roots, and it will start to yellow off this leaf very rapidly. So make sure not to overlight your cutting. Keep something at distance like this, maybe like I said 5 or 6 inches, and make sure it's not too hot around your plant. You don't want to burn your plant. No direct sunshine, and it should be out of the bright indirect spaces of your home and kind of be in the medium indirect space if you're using windowsill light. Okay, number 3 is do not over moisten your cuttings. The number 1 way people lose cuttings is by overwatering them. So if you're going in a glass of water, that's obviously straightforward. How to not overwater that, just change your water out. But if you're gonna use something like moss, this is 50% moss, 50% perlite. When you wet it, go from a dry state, moisten it, and then squeeze it out like a sponge, and there should be no water coming out of it. Even this has a little bit dripping out, so this is still a little bit too wet. I'd let it all drip out, and then that's the ideal moisture for your cuttings. Okay, number 4, keep your cuttings warm. It's very important to keep the root space in your cuttings between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is that waterproof thermometer I talked about a couple of videos back, and I've actually stuck the probe up into the bottom of this cutting. It's reading about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's the temperature that's ideal to metabolize a root system down in this moss. At temperatures below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, metabolism really slows and it will be much slower to root your cutting, and there's a much higher chance of the cutting kind of damping off and dying. Something similar exists in temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, really. The colonies will really start to take over, the fungal colonies and bacterial colonies will start to take over and then kill off your plant at times. That's why we always use a sterile cutting blade, a scissor or a blade, and that's why we always have a sterile media, the perlite, which is sterile, and then we use sterilized sphagnum moss. So that's so that we keep the bacteria out of this space, get our temperatures right, and then this plant will start to root very rapidly. Usually if your surrounding air is about 85 degrees Fahrenheit, your root temperature will be about 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit below that. And just a tip about over moistening, check the bottom of the pot, not the top necessarily, for how moist or damp this root zone is, because down here is where the stem is making contact with the media. So make sure that you're not seeing any water dropping out or any moisture at the bottom of your pot. Number 5 is just to leave your plant alone. The main problem we've seen also with people taking cuttings is that they'll unpot the plant, they'll go to check the roots, and it just disturbs the plant trying to establish a root system. So leave it for maybe every 3 days, check in on it, Make sure the dampness is fine, but don't ever yank on this stem to pull it out. Once a plant is kind of 2 weeks, 3 weeks in cutting, I'll kind of like move the stem left and right gently to see if it's starting to establish itself. And obviously the telltale sign of a rooted plant is having roots coming out of the drainage holes. But for most plants, that won't happen for about 3 weeks. For Syngoniums, it happens in about 2 weeks. It's very fast. But let your plant be. Try not to overwater your plant. Follow these tips and you should have better success rooting your rare plants. Thanks you guys so much for watching this week's video. If you did enjoy this week's video, please click the like button down below. And if you want to come back for more rare plant videos, please click subscribe and we'll see you next Saturday for another video. Have a good day.